call the workshop meeting for February 7th, 2022 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I think our first presentation is Knights Court. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Erb?
Yeah.
Dave, if you could come up to this microphone here.
Stand?
Yep. And tell us what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think on my plan inadvertently it had that the waste was supposed to be taken care of by the homeowners, whereas it's a dedicated street and it would not be. And it says it's dedicated, and I believe in my improvement agreement it says that it'll be taken care of. So I think what we have to do is change the record plan, re-sign it, and re-record it.
Looking for an amendment to the record plan. It was filed a number of years ago. The homes are starting to be built. You have how many?
There's one left.
Oh, one left.
Where is Knights Court? I was trying to find it.
It's off Pastel Lane, off
yes.
North Lane.
So the trash trucks can make it around?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Chris, anything, concerns or questions?
Everything is in order. We're collecting trash as it is trash and recycling now. And the road is to Township spec.
All right. Any questions from anybody else?
Dedication of the street will come when the last house is built and the final top coat is on and the final inspection's done by the engineer, and that hasn't occurred yet, but when it does, it'll be ready. But in the meantime, we have some homeowners in there already.
So the homeowners that are currently in there, is
Yeah.
their trash being picked up by the township?
It is.
Okay. I don't have any questions or concerns, unless anybody else does.
I just wanted to make sure he was able to re-record his plan.
Yeah, I'll
And remember
prepare
that notation, that the trash will be picked up privately.
Sounds good to me.
So I'll prepare the plan and then get it to you, and we'll go from there.
And, yeah, Chamber's office will have to sign it. You started that. Chamber's office, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes,
I'll write in red.
I'd take the red one.
yes.
I just,
Thank you very much. Yes.
He was a joy to deal with as an ex-PTO mom and prior PTO president.
Appreciate that.
I loved him. And your mother, she ran the nursery school my son attended for a year.
And my mom's doing great.
Yes. and
She's
they're-
handling all this really well. So.
They're both, I mean, what wonderful parents you were.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Our next one is 641 Old Elm. Mr. Lewis?
Good evening, everybody. Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart. Have to admit, I was a little bit surprised that we're under presentations, but I can, as you know, always talk, but I'll try and keep it short. I represent 641 Old Elm LLC, and my client, Evan Lambert, who is here, is the leasee and equitable owner as well of the old mansion house. We've been at this project actually off and on for a couple years, I think, actually now. But Mr. Lambert's plan is to reconstitute the restaurant, doing a much more upscale version of what was there before. He has extensive experience in the restaurant industry. We actually met with Township staff to talk about his proposal for the site, which really involves a very large investment in the interior, completely gutting and remodeling the interior of the space, doing exterior aesthetic improvements and so forth, and then opening a restaurant, which is a permitted use of that facility as a lawful non-conforming use. Because the site, the way it sits today, is technically only served by 5 parking spaces, some of which are actually in the right-of-way, there is always an overflow in the backyard, which is really kind of gravel and macadam and pretty ugly in the backyard. What Evan has proposed to do is actually to regrade that and then make it nicer, make it gravel, and designate parking spaces back there as overflow. And the only addition that is being proposed here from the existing facility is to add a deck on the rear, which and the deck will be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet, intended to be for seasonal dining in the rear. We, as I said, met with staff, talked it through. They agreed that we have the right to reconstitute the restaurant, to grade the rear and gravel that area to provide some additional overflow parking. But ultimately, the zoning officer concluded that parking was required for the deck. And we have filed an appeal from that because we do not believe that that is supported by your zoning ordinance. In the alternative, we have requested a variance from that requirement. In the end, our proposal is showing 36 parking spaces where 5 exist today, which Mr. Lambert, based on his experience, believes to be sufficient to serve his restaurant. We also have provided, I think, to council, certainly to your staff, an alternative proposal that we are willing to implement, which would effectively turn that rear parking lot during peak periods into valet only. That is what occurs at Mr. Lambert's restaurant now, which has even less parking for even more space. And they utilize, during peak periods, a valet only style service, which I think in that, Evan, is it 76 spaces we get that way through the valet? Was it over 80 car capacity. We won't call them spaces, but 80 car capacity. Obviously, nobody's going to be parking their own vehicles back there, so you're packing the cars in and so forth. So we have offered that and intend to offer that as a potential condition to any relief that the zoning hearing board might grant. But that's our project.
So obviously on the zoning agenda for this month is the issue over whether the deck would require additional parking spaces. In terms of the deck itself, is there anything that needs to be done, or is there anything?
No, I think, because the zoning officer, the definition of parking for a restaurant is going to be based on, I think, like gross leasable floor area. So, whether the deck is really gross leasable floor area or not, it's going to have tables and chairs on it. And that's why the zoning officer felt that with the additional tables and chairs, you're going to need additional parking. So I think that's what the crux of the relief is, right? Because
That's the difference in our opinion.
By definition, by letter of the law versus spirit of the law kind of thing, or whatever, I don't know. But that's the problem or the issue. And I think council, maybe even a couple months ago, before the new council members came on board, was concerned because the neighbors down there on Fulton Street in particular has always had a parking problem. As the families grow and they get more than 1 car, 2 cars, that kind of thing. And you probably heard about the parking problems on Fulton Street. So it's just concerned that there wouldn't be overflow, can't find a spot, and then they go into the neighborhood to park and take away from the residents who can't park when they come home from work. And that was, I think, really why council asked you to postpone a month and come and explain.
And then I had COVID, so we had to
And then you
postpone
got
another
COVID.
month.
Another month, that was January, yeah. So, just to see if,
Mr. Monero, do you mind just quickly, Karen, thank you, and that's all accurate, and I think it's important that I chime in on the Fulton Street. I know that a number of members of council and staff have seen prior proposals from my client for this site. We talked about at one point even adding residential to the rear to face out on Fulton, really kind of completing that portion of the street. That is all off the table. And in fact, the township now, I believe, through some of its funding, has actually added some parking along our frontage on Fulton. Our lot is a through lot. We technically have frontage on Fulton. It's now blocked more or less by parking. This proposal has no intention of taking any access from Fulton. All access would be off of Elm. So we are aware, obviously, that the neighborhood has significant parking problems today. I know the township is trying to deal with that and address that on its own terms. We don't believe that our proposal, as it is on paper, will have any impact on that. And that's why he obviously wants to open a restaurant in that location. So.
Just a quick question. If you did the valet parking solution, does that take care of the additional parking required by the deck?
No, it's not. Technically, valet parking is not recognized by your ordinance as off-street parking, so you would still need zoning relief to implement valet parking. So.
but it would solve the car problem.
We don't think we have a car.
If it were a car problem, it would solve that, because you could put 80 cars back there instead of,
You could.
Probably couldn't fit that many people inside the restaurant at the table.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, 2 people in every car,
Yeah,
not
I mean,
that many
if
seats
every
inside.
single person came solo, you might be able to pack 80 people somewhere around the facility on a night, but it's not likely. So, yeah, certainly the valet, and we've talked about it, and I've even mentioned to your solicitor, we're happy to talk about how that condition would shake out. Friday nights, Saturday nights, it would be implemented, or maybe there is a determination made post-opening whether or not, in fact, it's even necessary. But again, it's something we have offered. We don't believe that it's required, but it is something that we've offered because we are cognizant of the issues in the neighborhood.
This is going to be a restaurant bar, so there's going to just be a bar area too.
Sure.
So, I mean, that could account for additional cars.
Absolutely. It is a limited footprint. The building technically has 5,000 square feet total in the entire building, a little bit more because there are second and third floor. The current proposal is for the entire first floor, which is only 1,700 and change. It is not a large footprint in terms of the restaurant. So the deck is not only necessary, obviously, in times of COVID. It would be nice to have somewhere in case there are times where you need to be outside. But to even putting aside COVID, the only way a 1,700 square foot restaurant is going to survive here, particularly at the price point and at the level that they want to be, is to have some outdoor dining for seasonal opportunities. So we hope it's a success. He's got the experience in the industry, knows what he's doing, and is not going to open a restaurant where he's got to turn people away. So
I'm just curious, is that building historic?
I don't believe that it has any historic designation. I haven't seen anything on. It's certainly old enough to be, but
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
why
know that.
It's just curiosity.
I think that, and Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in Plymouth, technically, the only true historic designations fall within a designated historic district, which is obviously Chemical in Germantown, that general vicinity over there. So it's well outside of the vicinity of that, but somebody.
Well, that I know, I just wondered if
Yeah.
you had, it's
Is it
Put a
part
separate.
of
condition in zoning that they have to
Yeah.
reach
Part of
an agreement
Huntington?
with the township regarding valet parking, and then he and I can work that out.
We don't, in our workshop meetings, typically have time for public comment, but I know that there's 2 residents here who were here a month ago, and we postponed everything. Is it okay if I let them ask a question? Did you have a question, or?
I do have a question. And first of all, we would love to see a nice restaurant come into.
Could you-
Could you come?
Just for the record.
And identify yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Levon Gregory. I live at 631 Old Elm. I don't live on Fulton, but I live on Old Elm, which is the same street that the mansion house is on. What is your address, 635?
Yes.
She lives at 635. We're separated by a driveway, but she's actually one space closer to the mansion house. My question would be, I know that you may have resolved the issue with parking on Fulton Street, which is behind that lot the mansion house sits on. But we live on the front street, which is the same street, and there's only parking on one side of that street already. So since everyone has at least 2 vehicles per house, there's already no room for parking just for the residents. What happens if someone chooses not to do valet parking? Do we put signs up in the neighborhood to say resident parking only? Is there permit parking? This is going to be an issue. We would love to see your restaurant there, by the way. But we need to make sure that the people that live there are not able to park. And then the deck on the back, because we're so close in the backyards, what are you going to do to make sure that our privacy is not infringed upon? Because I can see out my bedroom window into the parking lot. If you're now putting a deck there, they're going to be able to see into my bedroom window. So what are we doing for privacy? So those are my questions.
So 2 things. From a valet parking standpoint, or I should say,
And Mr. Lewis, if you can get closer to the microphone, thank you.
from a street parking standpoint, it's up to the township what to do in terms of permits or signage and what have you. At my client's other restaurant, valet parking, when it occurs, as it would be here, is the only option, right? His other restaurant, there's no street parking available. Everybody's used to it. You come in, your only option is the valet. And that's how we would envision it if the valet becomes necessary. We're pretty convinced that we aren't going to actually need to implement the valet. We're offering it because we obviously want to be successful. So I don't know that that answers your question 100% on the valet, but we do believe that it would be successful. It's going to be mandatory. So if you want to come to the restaurant, you want to eat, and valet is in place, you're going to drive up. Your only option is going to be leave your car
Or they're gonna park
and valet.
in our spots on the street. That's because that's what happened before when the mansion house was there.
But the mansion house also, you've seen their parking lot. It's not welcoming.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be back there. So to that point, and the deck, our proposal is obviously to build a deck, and I think our interests are aligned. I'll say that. The people eating at our restaurant, paying to eat there, don't want to look in your bedroom. You don't want to see them eating.
Right.
So ultimately, we are going to do improvements, landscaping, so forth back there to provide a buffer for us and for you. So we will do that at some point as we're building the deck. We haven't finalized those plans in terms of exactly what we're proposing there, but there will certainly be a screen buffer that makes sure that you aren't being intruded into, and nor are you, looking over them as they're eating whenever they're eating.
I would just ask that before you guys say that this is a great idea, that you really take into consideration the parking is the biggest issue with us right now. If people have a little party or guest over for dinner, it already is a problem. We have to park in like business parking lots down the street because there's just no room. So if you guys can figure out a way, or you can figure out a way to say resident parking only, or you're going to be towed, or I don't know if you have permit parking. I know parts of Conshohocken do, but that would be our biggest concern. But again, we would love to have your restaurant. It would be nice to walk over there.
We want you to be happy.
Yeah.
John, not to put you on the spot, but I have to ask, is something like resident parking only enforceable?
That I'd have to look into. I do know that it's a realistic problem there, and I do think it's something that should be addressed in all fairness to the residents, because it's beyond tight as it is. So it's something that we'll look into to find out the legality and the ways that can happen.
Thank you. And obviously we'll read the zoning agenda later, but then you guys will be on zoning as well.
Mr. Monerica, may I ask Mr. Lewis a few questions before he leaves?
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. So you're on the zoning hearing board agenda for what date?
The 21st.
And you've indicated that the relief that you're seeking, one is a challenge to the zoning officer's determination that you need all of these additional spots. And did you say something that you need additional relief in order to have valet, or with just a parking in general?
Just in parking in general. So we've appealed the determination. We don't believe that your ordinance, as you read the ordinance, requires any parking for a deck. So that's our first basis. Despite that, regardless of the outcome there, we are offering a condition of valet. I don't think if it's imposed as a condition that there's any need for additional relief. Now, we have asked, alternatively, just as the Planning Commission recommended, if the zoning hearing board is not inclined to grant our appeal, we have requested the variance to allow the 36 spaces to be sufficient for the restaurant. Again, subject to the condition about valet.
So I'm actually working on an identical agreement in a neighboring municipality for valet parking and no parking in the neighborhoods. If we could take that agreement and in the next 14 days get that approved as a condition when you go in front of the zoning hearing board, is that something that your client would be agreeable to?
Having not seen it, probably.
Trust me, it's a good one.
No modesty.
So, and if we're not able to get it resolved between now and the 21st, you would agree that a condition of entering into an agreement with the township regarding valet parking is something you would consider?
It is something that from day one we have offered. In fact, I think we included a valet plan in our application. So it is something that we have always been willing to offer.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
I want to try the restaurant.
Great.
Let's go.
Give us an opening date, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Next, we have 550 West Germantown Pike.
Good evening. Speaking of restaurants, I represent Chipotle Mexican Grill. We're proposing to repurpose the existing vacant TD Bank building that's at 550 West Germantown Pike. I have present Ryan Armour from Collier's Engineering and Design, who's the project manager. You're probably familiar with the vacant TD Bank building in the lot. It's roughly a triangular shaped piece of property. It's about 7/10 of an acre in size. We're not proposing to change the existing access ways. They're going to remain the same. There's a full service access provided by from the circulation drive for the Plymouth Meeting Mall. And then there's an exit only to I guess that's the north side, that goes into a shared driveway that again exits out to the circulation drive for the mall. The most notable feature of this project is that Chipotle has, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but many people are, Chipotle has developed a sort of unique drive-through pickup lane. They call it the Chipotle lane. And it uses a mobile app. You order, and this takes care of roughly 50% of their customers. And that percentage is growing. This concept has really taken off. So you order on your mobile app on your phone, and you're given you pay for it at that time as well. You have your credit card is installed in the app, and you're given a pickup time, and that can be the next available pickup time. And they might tell you it'll be 20 minutes. So if we ordered now, it would be 6:45 or something like that. And you're told what time it'll be available. Or you can pick in 10-minute increments a time that you want to pick it up. We could say we want to pick it up at 7:10, and it would be there by 7:10. So then you go when you drive through, you don't go to a menu board, you don't order anything. You don't go to a payment window, you don't pay anything. You show up and you simply show the order form from your phone, and they hand you your order. And it works great. I mean, it really is a wonderful concept. And the most significant aspect of that, or feature of that new ordering system, from our perspective, is that it greatly reduces the parking demand. And that brings us to the two variances that we're requesting. And we're on the agenda for the 21st with your zoning hearing board, seeking two variances. One is with respect to parking, and that's probably the most significant one. And we are required to have, I believe, based on the square footage of the building, I think 57, and we're proposing 25 parking stalls. Frankly, 25 stalls is what Chipotle had developed for its existing, or legacy, call it, freestanding stores or restaurants, and 25 parking stalls was sufficient. Now, with half of the people, half of their customers ordering through the Chipotle lane, that parking demand has greatly been reduced. So we think that 25 parking stalls on site is way in excess of what the actual demand will be with a freestanding Chipotle store with a drive-through pickup lane. The other variance that we're seeking is an existing nonconformity, but we are extending the nonconformity somewhat, and that's with respect to the side yard. And the current side yard is 37.3 feet. Because we are extending somewhat the building for this drive-through pickup lane, it's going to be 29.5 feet side yard. I would point out the existing bank building has 3 drive-through lanes. We're eliminating them. They're in the rear of the building now. That's going to be removed, and frankly, that area is going to be largely landscaped, and removing the drive-through lane around the side of the building. And I would also point out that in addition to the 25 parking stalls that we're providing, there's going to be space for 8 cars to be parked in the pickup lane. So that really is from a practical point of view, we're going to have parking for 33 cars. So that's it in a nutshell. We are using the existing building, and there are significant parts of the building. The building is somewhat oversized for what Chipotle actually needs. I was discussing this with Mr. Armour, and one of the things is the bank vault the Chipotle doesn't need the bank vault, so there's a significant part of the building that isn't going to be devoted to the Chipotle use. But they wanted to keep the building. The facade's going to be changed. It's going to be, I think you'll probably agree that the TD Bank building, nothing against TD Bank, but that building is a little tired looking, and the facade's going to be updated and going to be a more vibrant look, we think. So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them, or Mr. Armour certainly will.
Is there a store in this model with the pickup lane locally anywhere that I could go see, just to see what it looks like?
Do you know the closest one?
I think the closest one is in New Jersey right now.
Well, I'm not going to New Jersey.
Not going.
Closest
Our traffic engineer, who was in front of the planning agency last week, goes to one all the time, I think up in Easton. I think he's
Oh, that's right, there is one up
in Easton, and he says it works great. He says there's like virtually no parking demand at all, and everybody's using the apps, and that's.
Yeah, I get, because I just, my only question, and, you know, is does that pickup lane ever get so filled that it could potentially spill out onto the ring road?
It really doesn't, and here's what we hear from time to time is about Chick-fil-A, which is somewhat notorious. There's one near my office too, and like at lunchtime, yeah, it's unbelievable. I guess we sort of wish we would have that volume, but we aren't going to. But that's the neat thing about this drive-through. All you do is pick up, and it works so fast. You just show the customer service, and you can't order there. If you shut up and say, "Hey, look, I forgot to order. You can't." And if you can't pay or do anything else, if that you're directed to go around.
Their standard is 6 is their queue. That's their minimum. So 8 is 2 more than their standard for this business model. So there is, so that's what they found with their use, that's all they need, because you are just picking up and leaving. You're in and out.
And they do have.
Stay closer, just so you can hear me. So they're in and out, and if you are not, if your order's not ready, there are 3 designated spots in front of the building that are their mobile order pickups. So if you did something like DoorDash, which you could also go in the Chipotle lane for, or you can go to these mobile order pickup spots in the front, let them know you're there. Or if the window, your order's not ready, you can pull into those spots and they'll come and bring it out to you.
Or you can pull in and order if you forgot to order ahead of time.
Yeah.
But you can't sit in the lane and wait, but yes.
But you do have some parking. You have to have a few employees anyway, right?
Well,
Yes, there will be parking.
what's the indoor capacity of the restaurant, like the sit-down capacity?
I think it was 48.
I thought it was 42.
Yeah, I think 42.
Now, I know Chick-fil-A is always backed up because you can order at the window in addition to the mobile
Right.
app.
That's
Are you going to have both also?
No, that's a very
No,
different business
that's
model than
definitely-
this. This is a 100% dedicated mobile order pickup.
So otherwise, you'd have to go into the restaurant to order.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And is there gonna be an indoor restaurant there, or is it just gonna be
Yes.
the?
No, there'll be an indoor as well.
Oh.
And it's sort of, I was sort of researching the history of this whole concept and how it came about. And they are so dedicated to making sure that there's no delay in picking up your order. They actually have 2 separate service lines. And so they'll have a dedicated person who's just preparing the orders for the takeout, the drive-through folks. And that's completely separate from the service of the restaurant. Because they don't want somebody like getting in the way of, if you're trying to prepare a meal for somebody who's trying to get their meal. They don't want somebody like over your shoulder, like grabbing stuff. So they keep it completely separate so that both work very efficiently. And it sounds sort of odd to have 2 separate like serving and preparation areas, but apparently it works very well.
Isn't there a Chipotle inside the mall?
Yes,
I-
it was anyway.
There was, is it still
Oh,
there?
inside the mall, yes, I understand that there is
So what
one.
happens to?
I
that
understand
one?
that that's going to be closed.
There's gonna be another tenant lost to the mall.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So you said the indoor capacity is somewhere between like 42 and 48, and you do have 25 dedicated parking spaces?
Yes.
Outside of the pickup line spaces?
Yes, outside of the pickup lines. And that's increasing, I think, by 2 what the bank currently has.
Correct.
Plus you want some outdoor seating too, right? Is it outdoor seating?
The outdoor seating is actually, they're removing a corner of the building. They're keeping the structure, so it'll be covered outdoor seating that takes away from the interior footprint. And when I reviewed with the zoning officer, we did include that as part of the parking calculation.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. They're zoning on the 21st also.
Yeah, that's to come to show.
All right. So we have a recognition for next week for Mr. Presti's 100th birthday. Anybody want to? I'll take that here. Nicholas. And we have 3 Citizens Board resolutions. The first one is for Barb for Parks and Rec. I would like to take that one if I could. Mr. Staples for Joint Sewer Authority.
I'll notify you.
Kathy. And Mr. Simpson for the Civil Service.
I'll take that one.
All right. Anything else before we go down to administration?
No.
All right. So the first one is this street dedication ordinance.
Yes, this is just part of a cleanup from the whole Lafayette Street corridor that was built, and was waiting for some information from the county as far as, when this transfer was going to take place, and was advised that you see the non-colored version plan behind it. There's a plan book and a deed page number there, plan book page and number. That's all that PennDOT needed to do to make the transfer on their end. So they basically are taking Diamond Avenue, which is now a part of Conshohocken Road, and the first block or two of Fairfield Road, which used to be a Township Street, and we're exchanging. We're going to take Lucetta as part of the swap here. I guess the color version shows you what's going and what we're taking and what we're giving to the state. But I just recently learned that even though this work has been done for a couple of years now, that all PennDOT had to do was file that one plan that has the plan book on it, deed book and page number on it. So now the township needs to pass this ordinance to accept a portion of Fairfield Road and Diamond Avenue as public streets, part of that original swap. And it's been advertised and it's ready for first and final consideration.
So Lucetta Street was not a township street?
So you used to come down Fairfield Road and turn onto Lucetta, and then that would line right up with Conshohocken Road. That was the state route, the SR. And they wanted to come right down Fairfield and go on Little Diamond Avenue as a one-way, and now it's 4 to 5 lanes across, right? So they had proposed this swap many years ago with the whole construction, the whole idea of the Lafayette Street was to do this, change the SR here as well. And that's what this accomplishes. So now the township will own this, the 300 block of Lucetta Street and the portion of Fairfield from Lucetta to the Ridge will become.
So does
Well,
that make,
actually, that's state. We'll
The state taking Diamond Avenue and that little part of Fairfield,
exactly.
and we're taking
And we're
Lucetta.
taking Lucetta. Yeah, that's it.
That's where I live.
Yes, and the 300 block, yes.
so does that make changes to maintenance responsibilities, potholes and all?
Plowing, yes, plowing, salting, snow removal. I guess we plowed it anyway as part of what we do for PennDOT.
Okay.
But yeah, potholes, resurfacing would be us now, right?
Lucetta Street's new asphalt, so it's pretty new.
Yeah, but in the future, if we own it, we have to maintain it.
Okay.
But
And the state has to
We
maintain.
gave up Diamond Avenue and a piece of Fairfield for it.
Well, Diamond is much more heavily traveled now.
Oh, shoot.
Gosh,
So
yeah.
be a lot
It was-
more
It was a one-way,
upkeep.
yeah, little street right the other day, yeah,
Tiny.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
So this is really.
the as-is condition of Lucetta is good? You don't have to go in right away, Chris, and do anything?
No, from a professional on the side of the street, I'd say it's pretty good for now.
Good, okay.
Mike, will you read that if it's an ordinance?
Sure.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions about that one? All right. The Burkheimer Resolution.
Yeah, so we have Burkheimer collecting our real estate taxes for us now, and they sent this resolution over. This is to appoint the finance director as the authorized contact representative between, between Burkheimer and Plymouth Township. So this is just a resolution that Burkheimer requires.
Anybody want to read that one?
I'll read it.
Was that you, Kathy?
Yeah.
All right. And Blackmore and Associates testing services for the, I guess this is for the renovation, right?
Yes, so Mike's office has reviewed this. We talked a little bit about this last month, but this contract has been reviewed and it's acceptable. And this is for testing things like the concrete cylinders and what other testing. I'm not sure what they'll do, but do you have an idea?
Well, it's,
Are you-
they do compaction testing, asphalt testing, any structural component of the renovation that has to do with site work, pretty much.
But it's just for the township renovation, not for any other projects around the,
Correct.
yes, this contract?
Now, was this a group that was secured by KCBA, or is this something that?
They went out, they asked, they had a scope of work, they sent it to 3 companies. This was the low one. They were all recommended, and this is the one we gave to Mike's office because it was the low one. We also had, I have the other 2 here, yeah. One was Earth Engineering.
Yeah, one was our engineer, I can't remember the third.
Oh, I have it right here, but yeah, it was sent to 3 companies.
It was in our paperwork somewhere.
One was Earth,
I saw it.
one was Cowan
Cowan
Associates,
says
and David Blackmore.
Yeah,
And these were all, they were all actually pretty closely priced, but this was the low one. And I believe it was-
yes.
All right. Everybody good with that? Questions? Anybody want to read that for next week?
I can take that.
Karen. Anything else under administration?
No.
Chief?
Only that our police association asked if they could also present a plaque to Mr. Presti for his 100th birthday.
Sure. Do we want to do that together with the other one, or do you want to do
If
it?
it's okay with you?
Sure.
When you guys are done? Thank you.
Casey has to go.
Condolences on the puppy.
Is that?
Condolences on the passing of the puppy.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Major.
I know, I was sad to read that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
How old was Major? 9?
No, he did 11 years of service with the township, and then
Wow.
only a month or 2 after he retired, son passed away. It was unexpected.
11 years is a good, he was.
It's a good age for a German Shepherd dog, especially a working dog.
All right. Anything else, John?
No, thank you.
Okay. Public Works, who's going to read the snow announcement this month? I'll read it.
take it.
Oh, Lynn? Lynn
Lynn's
said
gonna be
first.
great.
She
All
said
right,
first.
Lynn.
You know what happens if it snows.
It's wonderfully written.
Recycling Consortium motion for 7-year processing. This is a change, is that correct?
So this is, if you want to take
Yeah,
it.
it's a new one.
I was going to say, this is the one we've been extending for 6 months at a time, for
Yeah.
like probably the last year and a half, I think. So I wrote down the names of the other, of all 7 municipalities that are in this small recycling consortium. Right now, there's a transfer station in Upper Dublin Township, and we take our recyclables there. And right now, we were, in this consortium, we had a contract with JP Mascaro. And we were extending it 6 months at a time, and now April is going to be the end of that, and they're not extending it anymore. So they've been busy going out. They hired a company to, take a look at everything, went out for bid again, and Mascaro came back with a really high price of $140 a ton. That's for the transfer station operations, for hauling it back to their Birdsboro and the processing of it. So the new proposed price was $193 a ton. It jumped up $53 a ton. Very high, and it's not recommended that we continue with JP Mascaro anymore. Republic came up with a 7-year price just to process it for $105 a ton. We also get, what they call it, the commodity value back. If they can sell the recyclables, we get credit for that. So we won't really always pay the $107 a ton. The big question is, how are these other municipalities, going to all deliver the recyclables to Republic in King of Prussia? For Plymouth, it's very easy because we're so close. It's probably the same distance to go to King of Prussia as it might be to go to the Upper Dublin plant.
It's a little closer.
It's even closer. So for us to join in for the next 7 years with our consortium group, it makes sense. And you can see here the recommendations from the professionals that they hired to do a study for us was to temporarily do this direct haul to King of Prussia. So all these 7 municipalities are going to do a direct haul. So they can figure out what to do with the transfer station and how those other municipalities are going to get their recyclables from their communities, to King of Prussia. For them, it might make sense to put them in a great big long, tractor trailer and take them. That's how Mascaro was taking things out of that Upper Dublin plant. So this is really just for the processing, and we think it's a good deal for us to stick with this group and do this deal. The longer range deal, I said, I just don't know that it makes any sense for Plymouth Township to stick with this group. If they decide that they want to open the transfer station again, we would pay to transport our goods to Upper Dublin and then pay to transport them back out either to Birdsboro or, we'd just pay twice. Really.
Doesn't make
So
sense.
for transportation, if we can eventually stick with just delivering them ourselves, it's even better than what we're doing today. In the meantime, we think that this is the right way to go. This is not for the for the transfer station. I remember mentioning this before. There were everything from forming an authority to hiring employees to run the plant, the transfer station. I just don't see that's the direction that Plymouth Township needs to go because we're so close, and we can just transport it ourselves. But what they're asking for is like a motion vote. I have a sample in here from Springfield Township. So all they're looking for right now is something that says that, council's in favor of, staying with this consortium and doing this, switching over to Republic because they have a better price right now. And if all the 7 municipalities are in favor, then I think Upper Dublin takes the lead on this, and they would get their solicitor to draw up a resolution or in their governmental agreement to go forward for the next 7 years.
And if they don't, then the consortium falls apart and...
No, I think so for the processing of our goods, we stay together for this. When it comes time to decide if they get tired of running all individual, like small, trash trucks over there, they want to start putting it into tractor trailer size things. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense for Plymouth to join in on that. Because we'd be just paying twice to transport the goods, the recyclables. But for them, it makes sense,
Upper Moreland probably wouldn't either.
Upper Moreland, Cheltenham, you think of how big they are to start with and how many trucks a day would they have to run to King of Prussia? Lots, right?
Yeah, there's no real easy route from those places.
It makes sense for them to to probably open up the Upper Dublin transfer station again, but with a company who will and they just think that the Mascaro's charging so much, they could probably do it themselves cheaper, but it wouldn't make sense for us to join in with them at that time.
Would we be bound to join in with them with this,
No,
or is
he
this
said
just for the process?
this is processing, the deal with Republic is only for processing, and see here, accept, the recommendation from the consultant was to accept the Republic 7-year processing contract, retaining the commodity revenue, so that if, sometimes how long have we paid for this, instead of the 100 and,
Yeah, so whatever the cost is to process it and whatever the commodity value is, we would get the difference. We paid as much as $80 this year, and
And
we received, I want to say $12 or I think $12 was the most we received. But
it cost
that
us
kind of
nothing and
gets
they
you to-
gave us money.
Yeah, '08, we were making $12 from Re-Community. We haven't received money for the commodity on quite some time.
Right? Like glass is still a loser, you know, there's no revenue in glass, but there is in some plastics and cardboards and things like that.
Plastic's big right now. Plastic is the hottest commodity, and paper.
And they fluctuate, right, and that's what,
Aluminum is good.
yeah. And so as they fluctuate, so does our credit that we get, which is good, because they sell it and they make the money, so they, so we get that.
So would there be a possibility that some of these communities, like Abington and Cheltenham, would want to go to the distribution center and we would still direct haul to King of Prussia?
I think we should.
I mean, that wouldn't violate the consortium.
No, he
Okay.
said we could just, he said this recommendation is just for the processing.
Okay.
We're just accepting Republic's 7-year contract, and retaining this 100% of the commodity revenue, so if they get money for it, like we get money for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the
Concha has been taking their material there for some years, and are very happy with Republic.
Oh.
A lot of success.
Makes
In
sense.
and out.
So it seems like for processing, that's a good solution. For transportation, the short-term solution is to have Mascaro take care of it, but that's not long-term feasible. So then there's another solution, like a longer-term solution that needs to be
Not
addressed.
Mascaro anymore. Mascaro came in
Only
really high.
Republic.
So we're not gonna use Mascaro at all. We kinda lost, they bid it, but they lost. I mean,
Oh, so even transportation?
yes.
Okay, so I
And
thought I
so,
saw
and so
something
they're
there
not
that
gonna
said-
run the transfer
Yep.
station anymore,
Okay.
just because they want too much money to do it.
Yeah.
So everybody said, you know what, it would be cheaper for us to just run our trucks directly to King of Prussia, at least temporarily, till they can figure out, to say the last thing, evaluate their transfer station operations and transfer haul alternatives. They say it's not recommended indefinitely, but it's feasible in the short term for these townships to take, or municipalities to take their recyclables to King of Prussia. It still ends up costing them less.
And for us, it'll be probably feasible to
And
stay
for us,
that way.
I think that we should look into permanently direct haul, because, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's down the road, but it's also cheaper, it's way cheaper. And I guess if Mascaro loses the bid for a while, after a while, they may want to come back and be more competitive too. I don't know.
In 7 years?
Yeah, well, no, so this is just processing, 7 years. Depends on what, what we take it, but,
So we can direct haul it until there's a good reason not to?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So is this something we have to officially
Yeah,
vote on
they-
next week?
Well, next week, yeah, if
Yep.
you would have a motion and a vote, and because I said, what are you looking for? You looking for a resolution, are you looking for, and he said, just a motion and a vote, and he gave me what Springfield gave. It was a letter talking about how at one of their board meetings, they voted to award a contract to Republic for processing and marketing of the single-stream recyclables. So they're no good of $105 a ton.
Sounds good. So should we get something typed up just to have on the record? Or-
Yeah, I mean, I can make a very similar letter with, our letterhead with the same verbiage. This is what they're looking for.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Anybody else have any questions? Thanks, Chris, too. Appreciate it. Who wants to read that next week?
I'll take it.
Authorization to bid highway materials. see.
Yes, this is about the time that we put our paving project out to bid, and just as an FYI, this year's road projects is Sandwood, Palm and Pastel, Kennedy Crossing, Plymouth Rock Road, Jolly Road, and Beacon Hill. And Jolly Road is just that portion that Aqua did the work on. Aqua paid us money to hold off so we can do it all together and make it a better fix. Same with Beacon Hill. And Plymouth Rock Road has a trench restoration that's kind of falling apart. So that's the streets we're getting this year.
Any questions for Chris?
That's okay?
That's okay. Yep.
We'll take that off the agenda for next week.
Anything else for Public Works? Mr. Manai?
I have nothing to report this week, sir.
And subdivision and land development, first one is an extension for Conicelli. That's just a letter, right?
That's Nick.
That's Nick.
So just so you know, this land development that's in here from a few years back, 5 years back almost, I guess, it just showed a building, and this piece of land is the vacant corner at Ridge and Allenwood, across from the jug handle. Same corner that Toyota Service Center is in the back. It's the vacant corner up front. This land development just shows a building in the middle, a square building. It never said anything more. But before the planning agency, they had a sketch plan for a Royal Farms gas station and convenience store on this corner. So at that point, I think like this land development will probably be, if that goes further, this one would be withdrawn and a new one would be submitted. So if you're thinking of if you've heard about the Royal Farms, it's this corner, but it's not really this building.
Okay.
It's the old Floric parcel. Right. We don't know Floric, no.
Florida, no?
So it's right
We
there
have
when
not
you're
been born yet.
exiting the blue route coming off.
That's just where they've had some cars parked in there.
Piles of dirt
Piles of dirt.
that we were complaining about because they were spreading them on top of our pipes. Yeah, that one, yeah.
Pipes and structures and things like that were there at one time.
Yeah.
Alright. Are we down to Plymouth Town?
We're down to Plymouth Town, and that's going to be ready for approval. So that would be Mike, and we would need a resolution.
I had a lot of questions about this, actually.
Okay.
I don't know who to address them to, but one of the things was the waiver requested for it's on page 2. The waiver requested to go from 20 feet down to...
Oh, to 10 feet?
To 10 feet.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, I'm just wondering, is that safe? Just 10 feet from someone pulling into a parking lot? I mean, couldn't they just like crash through the building or something if they came home alone to see?
Yeah, which number was that, Karen, on this? Allow me to address, we see it here. Here are the waivers.
Under waivers requested, page 2, item 2, C2,
What's the section number?
502.3D.
To the left, 10 foot between.
It's on the first page.
outside wall.
Oh, it's on the first page?
Here, too.
Oh, I mean, I have it numbered, page 2, on the November 30, 2021 letter.
Yeah, I think this whole development mirrors, that waiver was similar to other waivers that were granted for the other sections of that apartment complex. So it seems to have worked okay with, in the really old one and the one that was currently built like a couple years ago.
So it's not a safety concern to
It hasn't
be
been,
that close to a building? And then, do they maintain their own driveways and stuff, because they're seeking a waiver on
Yeah.
the thickness of the substrate and all?
yeah, it's all private, totally private.
Okay, and do they snowplow themselves?
Yes.
Okay. And then, this is not engineering, but I had another one. Actually, I have some more, but I'm just gonna let them go. But I have a question about the, I was wondering, and this is under, from Montgomery County, have they met the recommendation from the county that that they expand their proposed sidewalks to have a complete pedestrian connection to Fairfield Road?
At the planning commission meeting, they agreed to conform with the county requirement on sidewalks, that they would extend them to Fairfield.
And how about the addition of crosswalks? Did they agree
Yes,
to
they
that?
said, yeah, they said they would do
Okay.
that.
And then, I think
That
the
was
next
last
one.
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, now this is the McCloskey and Favor
Okay.
landscape. And so I don't know if you know about this, but they're gonna plant tulip, poplar, and pear trees. Are those calorie pears? Because they're now being banned by the state.
Yeah. I know the Bradford pear was a problem because the branches were breaking. I don't know about these.
Calorie pear trees,
Yeah.
are going to be banned for sale because they're invasive.
So
Are they, I mean, I just don't know if that's the kind of pear tree
what
they
I
want
can
to
tell you
do.
is that I told the applicants that council members will have a lot of questions about the landscaping at the public meeting. So be prepared to either comply with the ordinance or have an alternative to the ordinance that's acceptable to the council and the landscape architect. So,
Okay, yeah, because I just wondered about some of the species
yeah,
they're proposing
you know,
here.
but please make sure to ask the question next Monday night, because they've been prepared by us to answer.
Okay,
All right?
yeah.
I would think that the type of trees would be something that they would be willing to
Yeah.
be flexible.
Yeah, I just don't want them
Yeah.
planting something that the
makes sense.
state Department of Agriculture has deemed to be unacceptable going forward.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that particular pear tree, but I know the Bradford pear, they were breaking. When they got their
They're
se-
breaking, but the calorie is invasive.
Yeah.
And I mean, nurseries allowed to, well, I don't know, continue to sell their existing stock, but then it's going
Yeah.
forward. I mean, the Department of Agriculture is banning a lot of species. Forsythia is going to be banned, that's coming up. Yep, yep.
Where's the
And English
How will
ivy.
you know when the spring is coming? That's what the forsythia is for.
Gotta look at another tree. You gotta look at the spice bush. plant
The
spice
baseball
bush
will
instead.
start being.
Baseball will tell you spring.
My tulips are already starting to poke up.
Uh-oh.
I know there were a lot of previous things that were granted for, to this development. And I think we talked once before about the parking spaces without a landscape island. Was that something that had been done prior also?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one of the ones I skipped.
Yeah.
I just thought I was taking too much
I
time.
thought it was allowed before.
Yeah.
I hate the look of it.
We will be, submit a waiver request for this. Judge, you'll come in.
Any other questions on that one?
No?
So that'll be a mic read, is that correct?
Yes.
Next one's 107 Ridge for FWAT.
It's me?
Also scheduled for conditional approval. So it will be a mic read as well.
Is that you,
I see
Kathy? Yeah.
Mr. Hughes here. Any questions or?
Good evening, Ed Hughes, attorney for the applicant, the Pike family.
Should we,
Our engineer, Brian Madsen from Apex
should we put the,
Engineering.
The microphone's over here.
I mean, you can come and get it if you want. I don't care.
It's only official if Len gets it.
Oh, sorry, I won't touch it.
I'm gonna break it.
That's right. Either
Randy,
charge
you
you.
bought it.
So we're seeking conditional final approval for the expansion of the parking lot at the Fingers, Wings, and Other Things facility at 107 Ridge Pike. We're also expanding the outdoor seating area by about 380 square feet. We're adding 19 parking spaces, about 700-800 square feet of additional impervious. the recommendation of approval from the planning commission. And it will comply with all the township review letters. Basically, we want to reconfigure the parking lot to make it more usable and more pedestrian friendly and circulation better. We're putting two planted islands in the middle of the parking lot that aren't there now. There was a waiver request to eliminate curbing around the planted islands, the rain gardens. Lonnie thinks we'd be better off with a partial waiver, to have curbing around some, but still allow water to get into it, which is okay. We'll just work that out engineering-wise. And then there's the requirement to have spacing between 15 parking spaces in a row. We're asking for a waiver from that. On one side, we have 18 parking spaces. On the other, we have 16. We think it's more important to have a little bit more parking. We are putting more landscaping into the parking lot than is there now. And we're doing some perimeter landscaping around the parking area.
I know part of their parking area had been zoned residential. Has that been addressed?
Yeah, the parking, the property is split zone. It's C commercial in the front, C residential in the rear. Our parking lot already exists in the C residential area, it's just being slightly expanded. And my other client built the two houses on Key Street, now they're back up to that area, and he was well aware of that situation. We have an agreement with Flaxman regarding buffering and fencing and things like that.
I was gonna ask about the screening for the residents, especially at night with lights.
Yeah, I think we'll comply with all landscaping requirements.
So I had a question. You just said increasing the impervious coverage. And in the Montgomery County Planning Commission letter, it says that they're commending you for following best practices to create green parking. So I thought, what is that then? I thought green parking was like, you know, impervious,
Well,
whatever.
right now, it's a parking lot with no rain gardens or stormwater facilities in the parking lot. Our new parking lot has two rain gardens along the two rows of the parking.
So it doesn't mean you're using that pervious type of...
No, it's impervious coverage. We got variances from the zoning hearing board to increase our impervious coverage percentages. We got that variances about 6 months ago, so we're just implementing that on this plan.
Karen, I guess to answer your question, they're not using porous pavement.
That's the word, porous.
They're not using that. They're using regular standard blacktop, but they are instituting rain gardens, and they asked for a waiver for curb around rain gardens. And I recommended against that because cars have a tendency to park in them, and curbs would help direct the water into the rain garden. In this situation, we'd have a gap in the curb, but the curb would channel the water into the rain garden from the parking lot.
So the recommendation is not to approve the absence of curbs.
Yeah, they're correct.
He has to have it.
In so much.
But it would be-
There's going to be that. It's not going to be complete curb. There's going to be sections that are open, but for the most part, there'll be curbs around it.
Right, just to protect the rain
So it'll
garden.
be a partial waiver in the sense that it won't be curbing all around the rain garden. And Lonnie and our engineer will work out what areas to leave open and let the water in, and it seeps into the ground. But to do perk tests and all that.
Lonnie, if I may, Mr. Mealy, has the drainage issue, I've been on an issue with Butler and I think it's Keys. There was a drainage issue. Would that rain garden
Yeah, they're going to.
help that
Yeah,
situation? I know we built a big
water,
berm.
yeah, that water comes down, it just flows off that track now, it goes straight down to the Keys.
Right.
When the rain garden will come in and be piped out of there to an inlet down in the street.
Because I know that property owner built a big berm because
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
currently was running right
Yeah.
into their house.
Yeah, so this, you know, I don't know if it'll help the situation, but it won't aggravate it further than what it is now.
In addition to the two rain gardens in the parking lot, behind the parking lot, in the green space between the edge of the parking lot and the Key Street properties is a retention facility that'll take the water into a pipe, down an easement out to Key Street into the stormwater system, eliminating the surface flow of water that goes now. It should improve the situation as well.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the resolution and the
think our next one is extension requests for Hallowell, is that correct?
Yeah, the entrance is an extension.
That's me?
Yes.
Escrow release for the Wawa parking lot, Nick?
Yes. And that's a final escrow release. No maintenance bond needed. That project is done, right? Wawa parking lot? Finished?
Yeah, that's finished.
Mhm.
Code enforcement, Jim, anything?
I have nothing on the agenda.
Zoning hearings, any takers on the read?
I can take it.
Is that Lynn or Kathy?
I think it was Karen.
I'll take it.
Who said
Who's-
Did you say Kathy can take it?
No, who?
No, I just said I can take it.
Oh, it was
I don't
Carl.
volunteer other people,
Sorry.
unless you're not here.
Then all bets are off.
Then all bets are off.
All right, and then life sciences draft ordinance.
This is why Mr. Lewis is hanging around.
I knew he was here for something good.
So,
Perfect night for me.
Go get him, Kathy.
I don't like this.
so Mr. Lewis and his client Brandywine Realty Trust have been here in the past asking for life sciences type use on the Metroplex east side and in the mixed use plan development district. Ken Amy prepared this draft ordinance that's in your books. We did have a staff meeting about it. We also thought it might make sense to add it to the office laboratory district, which also already allows laboratories and offices. And
Where is our office laboratory district?
we have one where I'm going to call it by its old name, but Plymouth Woods. They have another name for it now, Plymouth Corporate Ridge or something, but it's not on Ridge Pike, so that's very confusing.
The cut through to Plymouth Road.
Plymouth, yeah, the one across from the elementary school.
Oh.
That one.
Oh, that's an office laboratory. I
That's
thought it was just
lab.
office.
There's office lab on the real sharp corner of North Gravers Road and where it was Doug Sider's building with all the
Oh, I
solar
know,
panels on it.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Cooney
got it.
Brothers is in there, Mills
Yeah.
Wayne, some other companies are in there now. That's office lab. And I don't know if there's a third in the township, but those two areas are definitely.
But they're office lab, not office lab manufacturing.
Correct. Right now, there's no such thing as office lab manufacturing except for with this life sciences, which is
Yes.
what's being proposed with like the pharma type uses.
Does Harb extend up to Metroplex 3, or is it end at 2?
I'm sorry, does what?
Harb's realm. Does it go up? Because I know
What's that?
Historic Architectural Review Board, because
oh,
Lindsay's
Harb,
included,
yeah.
and I
It's the
know
historic district.
the district goes up further than I expected it to. I don't know if it
It's just along Germantown
includes.
Pike. It's just along,
Because we actually had a look at something that went into Metroplex 2, was it, I guess, that office building?
Yes.
Even though, obviously, but it was within, and I thought, gee, I wasn't sure if 3 was included. But I have that tomorrow morning, and I'll check with them.
I can send the map around for you.
No, I'm gonna be over there tomorrow, so I'll check, or Wednesday rather.
It's on our website, but there is a historic district map.
Yeah,
That we
yeah, I
can
have
share
it at
with
home.
White Marsh Township, and I know it includes like the Livesey store and.
And it went up because I was shocked. Like, why are we talking about that in that office building that was built? It went into Harb for some reason. So, and then I thought, well, gee, I wondered if I didn't know if it extended as far as Metroplex 3, I think this is called, right? Or if it ended prior to that. But I'll check the map. I thought you might just know.
Yeah, it doesn't go very far back off Germantown Pike. There was the Livesey store, and there was the old residence up by the railroad track trestle there. But that was part of the Harb district, the historic district. But
And Livesey is in it, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah, of
it is.
course,
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying,
that-
right along Germantown Pike there.
That's why it's included.
And it includes the gas station, it includes a couple homes along there where Burton Stein has his,
Yep.
place, Stu Kessler's place. that's all
But
there.
it went further down Chemical Road than I thought it would.
Okay, yeah, not too far though. But this, at that time, council said that we should proceed with a draft ordinance. And I know we have two new council members who probably, have not heard the request from Brandywine to add this to their area. They do have a conditional approval for a 12-story office building and a 6-story parking garage. There's not a lot of market right this minute for office space, so there is some market for pharma and life sciences. So, that they came before council last year and asked could they proceed with this, and they did. They made an application to you, which you don't have to. It's up to you whether you act on it or not. They also asked if that little piece of property, which is for the 2 stories, zone limited commercial today. It has the historic district overlay on it, but it's in the limited commercial. Asking to also, in their application, to rezone that to mixed-use plan development so that it's all one district, or one zoning district.
So that manufacturing could continue down further away from the area where they're currently planning it, if they so decided to change.
If council decides to adopt this, then it would be any land in the mixed-use plan development and the office lab as it's written today. That's what's being requested. So, yes, the shopping center, if you want to take down Lowe's and put up a pharma, because that's in that district.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, but.
Talk to Goldenberg about that.
But but it's in the district, is what I'm saying. It's in the district, so you always have to look at all the uses in the district. What
Right.
could happen? What could happen someday,
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's only one mixed-use plan development zoning district in the township, and it's the complete metroplex, east and west. The west is the shopping center, and you've got the blue route that goes over top, and then you've got the east, which is was the office buildings. So you have one office building in there now, 5-story. We have approval for another 5-story office building and approval for a 12-story office building and a 6-level garage. So there's a lot
And
more
another
development
3-story garage. There's 2 garages
could
actually.
happen on that site. Yeah.
Rob, I know you look like you're chomping at the bit to talk, but
No.
just to recap, like for the new members of council stuff, and stop me wherever I say something that's incorrect. So years ago, when the whole Metroplex project was approved, it was approved in phases, correct? So phase 1 was done, phase 2 was done, and this phase 3, it's not just in general terms, it's not a new development. It's just already been approved. It's just now ready to be developed.
Correct.
But because the market has changed and there just isn't a market for office space anymore, which was the original plan, but there is a big growing market for life science, the request would be that we allow life sciences to operate there where it normally would have been traditional office, essentially because there's no tenants that would want to come and take the regular office, but there is a need and a market for the life science today.
I agree, Chris. The Brandywine can pull building permits today for 460,000 square foot of office plus 2 parking garages because all the infrastructure is already actually in, technically. The market's not there. And there's some conditions. They have to have some pretty significant tenants. And quite frankly, you're not building a 12-story office tower unless you get a major corporate tenant that wants to take enormous amounts of space. We've been very close a couple times in the past, when office markets were hot, but it's not there. And what I think Mr. Comito had explained when we were still actually back at the old space, that's how long ago that first meeting was, is Brandywine's portfolio has taken a pretty significant shift over the last few years, and pharma, and particularly this life sciences, the integrated pharma, is really what they're seeing the interest in. And to them, particularly, this location makes a ton of sense because of how it is self-contained, because of the space they have, and because of the opportunities they have to present to potential tenants. One, large-scale, ground-up construction. There are 2 important, I think, things since the last time we talked. I know a lot of concerns, just, manufacturing in what is traditionally an office park concept. But two things did change, I think, with Ken Amy's revisions or his review that just are worth noting. Ken suggested and put into the draft that any use for life sciences for this use would be conditional use approval. So it would require more than simply coming in for land development. We would have to come in and explain to you really who the tenant's going to be, how the use is going to operate, and make sure that we comply with the other piece, which is Ken has also incorporated specifically all of the performance standards in your ordinance to make sure, talking about noise, vibrations, emissions, smoke, dust, all those things, so that those are able to be considered by council on a level that wouldn't be able to be considered if you're just in for a land development or building permit. So those are two things that Ken did to the ordinance draft that we talked about when we were here a couple months back.
So if it's conditional use, does that mean should this pharma company ever leave, that only life sciences could come in, some other kind of manufacturing
Well,
could not come in? I mean, they couldn't come in
yeah,
and
straight
start making
manufacturing would not be
widgets?
permitted. You're right. And typically, because you have an excellent solicitor, anytime a conditional use approval is granted, there are certain conditions that are put on that. Number one of which is conformity with the testimony and exhibits presented at the conditional use hearing. So that means if XYZ Corp comes in and says, here's what we're going to do. Here's the type of manufacturing we do. Here's the product we're performing. Blah, blah, blah. They lay out everything they do. That's in the testimony. So if they obtain conditional use approval, some other ABC company can't simply step into their shoes unless they do exactly what it is that X, Y, and Z did before. If it's a new use, they would have to come in and get a new conditional use approval. This ordinance also does not allow it to simply be a manufacturing facility. It has to be an integrated facility that includes the research, the development, the office, and the manufacturing on that campus. And that's the goal for Brandywine. They don't want a manufacturing facility that's just trucks and noise, and they want a pharmaceutical industry.
Spewing black smoke everywhere.
Exactly. They want something that's going to look like an office building, but it's really pharmaceuticals where there are people in their lab coats doing whatever they're doing. There's people in their offices trying to probably sell the product, but they're also able to try and ramp it up for production.
Do we limit the size of the manufacturing facility?
I believe it is in the ordinance. There's a ratio that I know Ken had some ratios in there. The entire district has certain ratios that have to be met. This ordinance actually is one of the few that I think predates me. I think from the mixed use. So there are a certain amount of office that's permitted, a certain amount of retail, and then there are different provisions for how much of each of those, depending on whether or not you have a hotel, depending on whether or not you have a single tenant over 100,000 square feet. There are all these ratios that are integrated into this ordinance and have been there for at least 15 plus years. And I know Ken was integrating this into that as to where so that it limits how much of each use you can have. Right now, retail is essentially all occupied by the eastern portion, by the current retail center. That's why this side has always been referred to as the corporate side, because it really was resigned to being office and hotel.
And there'll be no retail going on in this.
Correct.
But does that open it up so that the other side that's currently all retail could at some point also look like this mixed use lab, office?
I don't know that there's any prohibition in this ordinance from the other side doing that, other than the simple market economy that it's not going to have. It's a separate owner. It's owned by Goldenberg. It's not owned by Brandywine. But I don't believe that there's a prohibition if they are zoned that way. I would have to double check. But
I'm just thinking from a township perspective, if we allow it on this side, does that mean it's also basically allowed on the other side?
Well, that's
Now
why I
we
was
line it up.
asking initially about the existing smaller office building closer to the Lindsay building. That could switch too and become manufacturing if the mixed use is extended.
So I just made a note to check, back to the ordinance, because it's been a long time,
Sure.
and check with Ken too, as Rob saying, for the percentages. Yes, this district was kind of crafted for this. There was supposed to be an entertainment component, an office component,
and even a hotel component was always envisioned
the hotel
at
part
one
was
point.
there. There was a whole gamut, but yes, so many square feet of this, so many square feet of that. So I just made a note to myself to check to see, again, if it's, because I don't see anything in this ordinance, in this draft ordinance.
Correct.
But the current code does have all kinds of
Absolutely.
square footages of certain amounts of types of uses, so that you get a mix. So that the whole thing couldn't be shopping, a mall or shopping centers. It couldn't all be retail. It couldn't all be office. It couldn't all be, there's percentages. It couldn't all be one thing.
And I know that for some of you, this harkens back to where we kind of started, but for those that weren't here when we started, part of the presentation that Mr. Comito from Brandywine was making is that from an impact standpoint, this represents nearly a 50% reduction in total impact, estimated impact from the development of the remaining portion of Metroplex. When you heard Karen talk about 12-story office tower, 6-story parking garage, the footprint to accomplish a life sciences facility like this ends up reducing that square footage by nearly half. The amount of vehicles coming in and out from an office standpoint, again, dramatically lower, might even be less than half, things like that. So impacts from traditional impacts of traffic generation and density, this represents a dramatically lower impact than what is already improved, or approved, for the site. Obviously, we've been talking about the other potential concerns, but I think those are addressed.
So I think the short answer is yes, they could do this mixed use on the other side.
Probably.
Obviously, as Mr. Lewis says, it's partially what the market will bear. But when we got this draft from Ken, we took a look, and if you look at, I think it's section 6, he references the mixed use requirements. So anything would have to be contingent upon those mixed use requirements that's already in the office. So as Karen alluded to, and as Mr. Lewis alluded to, you couldn't all just change over everything on the other side. It would
still
have to
have
have
to
that
maintain
mixed
balance.
use aspect to it.
But the fact that they're asking for that to be done, so, to make it so much nicer and everything's cohesive, I just get very suspicious, and I think they got a plan in place.
Who does? Us?
Your client.
Oh, I
Would
mean,
have a
you've seen our plan.
A plan in place to be able to make use of expanding your manufacturing into other areas along Chemical Road in addition. That's why they're asking
Oh,
for
no,
the zoning change.
Well, I think
Our only plan is Metroplex, the 22 acres that we have at Metroplex. That's why, I mean, Brandywine has not asked for this use to be allowed in any of the other properties that they own anywhere else in the township. This
No,
is,
I know, I'm just talking about Chemical Road.
yeah, and so on Chemical Road, Brandywine owns that roughly 22 acres that you have to cross the bridge to get into. That's it. That's what they own, and that's where they believe that this is appropriate. That's why they've asked for it here. They don't own the retail portion. That's owned
No, I understand.
by a number of other people.
But they still want to extend it further than.
well,
Did you not?
I don't think Brandywine wants to extend it. I think what Ken is trying to avoid here in his draft, he's trying to avoid spot zoning. He's trying to avoid taking one particular parcel that is similar to many other parcels, and we're only going to allow one particular use on this parcel and not on the other ones. And I think that's your definition of spot zoning. And I think there's not a planner alive who that's not the first concern they have every time they look at a draft ordinance. So I think that's what that is driving this more than any plans that we've heard from Brandywine or from the Goldenberg Group.
No question. Yeah, Goldenberg has its own plans for the retail portion, and there's actually separate owners in there. Goldenberg owns most of that, but not all of it. Some of the individual stores are owned individually by those tenants and things like that. But Goldenberg has lots of plans for the Metroplex. Hopefully someday we'll see them.
But this would fulfill part of the office component, is what Ken's saying here.
Correct.
So is this a zoning matter or a conditional use matter? Are these separate things?
So this is a proposed amendment to our zoning code, which would have to be adopted through an ordinance, an ordinance amendment. When the applicant comes in with any specific plans, it then has to be approved by council by conditional use. If there are any zoning elements, then they would have to go to the zoning hearing board. But I think with their original plans of what they had approved, is very unlikely that they would need any zoning relief as far as dimensional zoning relief.
Correct.
And you're giving them, if you adopt this, you're giving them the use that they're asking for, but it just needs to go through by conditional use. And again, so there's no misunderstanding. Sometimes people think that conditional use means we can place any conditions on the approval that we want. The conditions have to be those that are laid out in the ordinance, which Ken has detailed by reference.
If I, oh, I'm
You
sorry.
need both, then you need the zoning amendment and you need
Not tonight,
conditional.
no, absolutely
tonight,
not.
but going forward, you need first zoning relief and then,
Not actually zoning relief,
I mean,
because
zoning
we would be
amendment.
amending our zoning code and making this a permitted use by conditional use.
oh. maybe
So
I
then,
get it now.
so when they submit something, they need to come back to us with the conditional use application. And as I indicated, based on what I've seen with their previous approvals, they're not going to need any zoning relief for any dimensional relief, because they got pretty
Footprint would
much
be so
everything.
much
The
smaller
footprint,
than
yeah,
what
yeah,
already
yeah.
is approved.
They're not going to go higher, they're not going to get more, closer into the setbacks or anything along those lines.
Maybe I'll, just if I can quickly, the layout, the best case scenario. If council were inclined to adopt the zoning text amendment that we've requested and that gets adopted. Brandywine's obviously talks to everybody about everything, but they don't have any tenant lined up yet. So some tenant comes along and says, look, we'd love to build a 275,000 square foot life sciences facility at the Metroplex. I'd say, wonderful, they'd negotiate that, and at some point, we would come to you with a proposal for that site, which is a conditional use application. A conditional use application would lay out a narrative as to what they propose to do. It would have schematics of what the layout is likely to look like in two-dimensional, but likely also three-dimensional, because three-dimensional is important for this type of facility. And we would have to schedule a public hearing. And at that public hearing, we are trying to demonstrate to you that we satisfy the conditions that Mr. Amy has incorporated into the ordinance. And all we talk about at that point is the use. And that's where we talk about the concerns about emissions and vibrations and fumes and smells and all of that stuff. Assuming we can satisfy you all, that we meet all those criteria, only then do we even get to land development. And then we get to go through Lonnie analyzing all the actual technical requirements of the land development. So it's a long process, and this would only be step one.
So the amendment only allows integrated life sciences, no other kind of manufacturing.
Correct.
And it sounds like the conditional use component is where we're actually protecting ourselves against things like excessive noise.
Correct.
And we'd have a chance to look at that and say like, no, that's acceptable or that's not. And then if the first tenant leaves and another tenant comes in, like with that conditional use in place, if they were to do the exact same thing and make the exact same amount of noise, we'd have to allow it, or we'd still be able to say, no, we're gonna look at it again. How does that work when someone follows an initial tenant?
Yeah.
Continuing to address like the conditions with a new tenant.
So the only way I usually look at it and talk to my clients, obviously trying to advocate for them, if somebody buys your business but changes the name on the building, that conditional use is certainly going to roll over and you're going to be able to use it and come in and change your business. Particularly in a pharmaceutical realm, I can't imagine two users that are so identical in what they do that one could take advantage of the prior's conditional use. They just aren't going to be similar enough in exactly what they do to simply step into their shoes. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but our burden would be to demonstrate to your staff when we want to pull an occupancy permit, they're identical to the testimony we presented at the prior conditional use here. Absent the fact that they comply with everything that was talked about, they're not going to be able to step in. They're going to have to come back for a new conditional use approval.
And I think that's accurate.
So that's where we protect ourselves against sort of like something coming in that we didn't anticipate.
Correct. Correct.
And that's the whole intention of a conditional use process.
Right. And as Mr. Lewis is saying, if it's Lewis Pharmaceuticals gets bought out by Jones Pharmaceuticals and they're doing the exact same thing, we don't get another bite at the apple at that point in time. But if one company is leaving and another company comes in, then we are going to be able to examine everything that they're doing. and see if it is the same general character, and if it is, we will allow them to continue. If it's not, then they're going to have to go through the conditional use process again. Probably not the land development process, because at that point in time, something's probably already built.
Yep.
And unless there's any significant change there, they wouldn't have to go through land development again.
Would conditional use also give us any say over what type of hazardous products are being created, like serums or?
It would certainly be reviewed during that process, but as long as you comply with the standards, and we would have to demonstrate that, you know, if we're regulated, who's regulating us and what our regulations are, all that information is going to be put into a conditional use process. So you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear what it is that this person is proposing to do, whether or not they're regulated, you know, are their emissions even regulated, and if they are, how are they addressed? You know, what kind of raw materials are coming in to create whatever it is in that facility. All of that would be vetted during that conditional use process. I'm not going to tell you that you can just say no because you don't like the one type of material coming in, but what we have to do is demonstrate to you that material can come in and be safe and be handled in accordance with the criteria in the ordinance.
And the other thing that we've discussed, as you can imagine, this is one of the more highly regulated industries in the country. So in addition to Plymouth Township, there are going to be a great many other governmental bodies that are going to have jurisdiction over anything that's done there, and they're going to have to comply with everyone else who is going to have some regulatory authority.
And I know we talk a lot about pharmaceuticals, and we talk about, you know, some of that aspect of life sciences. Life sciences can be more than that. It can be literally somebody creating a new artificial joint, and they want to manufacture an artificial. I have 2 artificial hips. You know, they could be somebody manufacturing something so when these wear out, I can put new ones in. It can be that as well. I know that there's a little bit more concern when you're talking about the pharmaceutical side of it, but life sciences would certainly allow that to happen as well.
Any other questions? So what do we
So
need?
the question is, you know, does council want to move forward with the hearing at this time?
For the zoning change.
Yes.
Zoning amendment.
For the zoning amendment.
Yeah, to change the text in the book. And since it includes a map amendment, you know, if you're ready and if you want to do this, then we have to send it to Montgomery County Planning Commission, and because it includes a map amendment, we need at least 45 days from the day we send it before we can have the hearing. We would schedule a hearing if you're ready to move forward.
Hearing on the amendment, not conditional use.
Correct, that
Down
would
the
come
road.
afterwards. That would be the next step.
I'm okay with that.
If you want to move forward, I just need to know so we could schedule.
I'm okay with moving forward. Hear from our colleagues here.
Nick? Lynn, Kathy?
I'd like the whole thing to go away, but at this point, it's not going to. So I guess we have to move forward and explore it in more detail, get, you know, see what happens. But there would be a public hearing, right?
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rob. All right, anything else under zoning that's not on here?
No, because those two kind of go together, but
Yep.
we'll schedule that.
I have another zoning hearing board application. I assume council doesn't have any comments or questions on that one, that 11C acquisition.
Yeah, we're turning that one back.
Which one is that?
Allen Road, 407 Allen Road.
Oh, yeah, the truck.
Or the scrap metal yard.
For truck terminal in front of the trash disposal plant.
Yeah, add that in with Amazon Prime. Ridge Road's gonna take a beating.
Anything? All right. All right, Parks and Rec.
Can I take it? Phil came up with a new idea. Suggested that we're not getting much bang for our buck in reading the service and devotion monument every other month as we've been. I mean, we can still do it, but we're not getting orders that way. But he had an idea for, like maybe each month coming up with the upcoming events, so that if council wanted to read them at meetings, and that's and it lets everybody else know too. What's coming up.
Fun.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun. I'm not saying your meetings are boring, but.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right.
Is
And I
this
think
is the service and devotion information like posted somewhere at all times?
It's on the website. It's been
And it's in
almost
the
10 years.
whatever comes in the mail. If that do we don't still put that out in the mail, do we?
We could put it in the newsletter.
The newsletters, it's in there or is
Oh,
it
yeah.
not? Yeah, that's fine. Just
That,
want to make sure it's still there
benches, the
somewhere.
bricks,
Yeah.
everything is in there.
There's
Sure.
bricks and pavers at the butterfly garden too, but we're not getting too many more at this point.
We
Yeah?
got a ton of benches last year. We sold
Benches,
4
trees,
benches last year and trees last year.
memorial type things.
Yeah, we can still do it, but this is a little more timely, and it'll help us fill the program. So
Yeah.
if you would do that, we appreciate that.
Sure.
Each month we'll update it, and I think Karen Bramblett had suggested we cut off things like by the second Monday, so everything will be fresh every time you read it, so that'll help. It has Plymouth Township Day on there, you can save the date for that.
That's a great idea, because a lot of people always ask, when's it going to be?
Right, yeah, exactly. So if we can get out ahead of it, I think it'll help.
I'm happy to talk about anything in June. Just mentally.
Aw.
It's the day after my birthday, so.
Any takers on reading the events?
I'll read it since it's fun.
I guess the other thing that Paul and I were talking about was the youth sports funding for 2023. Remember in the fall when we had our budget hearings, council did agree to fund the youth sports groups again for 2022. But now is the time for the Parks Board where they start asking them for their financial statements and everything that you would use in the fall for 2023's funding. And the only reason we bring it up is that at one point, somebody suggested that some of our youth sports have like $250,000 in the bank, and do they really need our $2,000 or $4,000 or $5,000? And we didn't want to ask them for this information and then not give them some money. Otherwise, it's really not our business. But if we ask them, then they're kind of going to expect to be funded again. And there was just some talk about not funding them at all. They usually don't get funding from White Marsh and Conshohocken, and a couple of them have really significant dollars in the bank. And a couple of them don't even have a majority of their members be Plymouth Township residents. So there were a couple of reasons why it was talked about not funding them, but it's totally up to you. But now's the time for the people, the board, coming into the Parks and Rec and giving, and we're asking for, we will be about ready to ask in March. So should we or should we not? That's the question.
So if I may I? I mean, I'm the chair, I guess I may. Right?
That's the chair.
I don't personally have any desire to stop doing what we've been doing. I think it's a small portion of our budget, even though some of these groups do have a nice kitty built up. I just think community-based youth sports are something that is really important to hold on to, and whether they're in dire need of it or not from us, I think any little bit that we continue to give helps them to continue to be able to be part of the community, as opposed to the high price tag other things that families are burdened with every day. So I like that we do it. I don't think it costs us significantly enough to want to take it away, but I think that the impact that it can have long term, I think, is important. So I like that we do it. I think the process is good. I think they have to come and give a thorough presentation of what they need. They often ask for more than we actually end up giving them anyway. So that's kind of where I stand.
Do we ever ask them about their scholarship policies? Are you giving, because a lot of these sports cost a lot of money for the kids to take part in them, for their uniforms and materials, equipment I should call it. Is part of their presentation include what scholarships they're offering? I mean, because these people have got like, $250,000 sitting in the bank. Are they giving scholarships to their kids whose families can't afford?
we're gonna update the form to make it a little more modern, and I'm gonna put that question on there.
Yeah, I'd like to know how
I mean,
this,
communities, one of the reasons the township funds them is to keep them affordable for the families, like
Yeah.
Chris was saying. The other thing I'll add on that is there's accountability. By them having to come to us now, you know, we have a little bit better idea of what's going on and where they're spending their money. We don't give them the money. I know there was another youth baseball group that we stopped giving. They didn't want to come to the meeting because they didn't want our money anymore. So, you know, I think it's important that they have come and they're accountable to somebody. But we'll put that
I'd
on
like
there.
to know what they're doing,
Yep.
especially for our township youth. But I mean, I don't mind helping out the youth in Norristown and Conshohocken who are taking part in our programs.
Put that on the form.
Okay.
Is it currently a matter of like, is there sort of a needs basis to how those funds are allocated? So if someone has $250,000 sitting in their kitty, do we tend to give them a little less and give someone else more who might need more? I mean, is there a needs basis to it?
I feel like we tend to just, I mean,
The same as we gave last year.
it's almost like they can, in their budget, their yearly budget, they can kind of count on, you know, we're going to get X amount from the township. Right. And like I said, sometimes they might have a specific project going on, or they might ask us for more, but we don't typically give more unless we really feel a need to.
And do we ever delete or add to the organizations that are getting our money? I mean, is the list, since I've been on council, seems pretty consistent every year.
We added American Legion Baseball a couple of years ago that had previously not, they just hadn't asked.
And that was it, and nobody else has asked, so.
And we've never dropped anybody, except that one that refused to.
I can tell you that has happened over the years. Different council members have different organizations, maybe a little near dear to their heart, so they add one, and that we have taken some off. We've done the same with the charities, so sometimes we used to give to Camp Rainbow. We don't anymore. A couple different things have come and gone. Different council members, you know, just asked to give one and we took one away. It has happened. It's kind of like your choices or your charities or, you know, people that you want to give to. That has happened through the years.
Well, I agree with you, Chris. I think it's important to show support for, you know, for keeping kids active and physically, you know, engaged in good activities. But do we ever ask them for an accounting of how they spent the money?
Oh, they give us a budget every year.
Okay, so.
They're supposed to give us a full
do.
budget.
Yeah,
Because,
they don't
you
give
know,
us that.
I just keep wondering why there's $250,000 sitting in some of their bank accounts.
Like, what are they gonna do with it?
Yeah.
They're taking all the kids to France to.
Well,
I mean,
it's
some of them
scary.
do have big, long-range plans, and there's sometimes they might come and ask us for things, and we might say, hey,
Go
maybe
with
it's
your-
time, maybe
go
now's
with your
time to
kitty.
spend what you have, some of which we gave you over the years, so.
Yeah. Well, you always read on, like, somebody in a township embezzles funds and, you know, that's a tempting pot sitting there. You just wonder how much control is exercised over that.
Well, I would hope that doesn't happen, but they are very thorough in what they present.
And they have to
Okay.
meet with the Parks Board. In March, we do the indoor group, no, the outdoor groups, and Rick comes, and then we do the indoor groups in April. And they provide us their accounting sheets, a balance statement, their statistics, who lives in the township, who lives outside the township. And we'll make sure, we're redoing the form, so we'll make sure you get copies of that. And it should be easier for us to collate it now, which will make it easier for everybody to look at it, so. I mean, they spend 15 minutes with it, but, you know, and hopefully it prevents some of that behavior, because there is somebody looking at them,
Yeah,
hopefully.
it's important.
Yeah.
Are they still charging a registration fee with that?
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
They are, but you know, I can just speak from a law knowledge in this area that the registration fees that these organizations charge, I mean, yeah, some are more than others, but, you know, again, in comparison to, I mean, I can just speak for baseball. Like, if a kid goes and plays for some travel baseball organization, they might pay thousands of dollars, whereas opposed to, like, if they're going to play for one of these local community organizations, it might be a few hundred. So I think most of these local organizations, and like, look, soccer has travel and they have regular, so they have different tiers, but I think almost all of them charge a registration fee. I do think most of them are very accommodating if there's families that have financial issues, and they don't let that be a stopping point, but I would say that the registration fees exist, but they're just lesser than some of these outside private organizations that run for profit would be.
Yeah, I was just thinking, that the monies that the township gives perhaps can go towards like the registration fee, the discount registration fee, and maybe that would, get more people to be involved. They don't have to pay that registration fee.
To reduce it for families to be able to feel they can
Kind of
join.
comes up where your scholarship idea comes in.
Yeah,
To
same thing.
Yeah.
offer reduced or.
Yeah, how are they helping out
Everybody in need.
Yeah.
the families who are, strapped for cash, especially if they have several kids involved in, different activities, and some of them are involved in things other than sports, they're doing other things that the family has to pay, whatever, so.
And it's not a bad idea to look more how they get directed on these funds. I mean, we can't tell people, I guess, how to spend their money, but we can ask them to show us how they are if we're going to give it to them.
I know that at least one of them charges, the ice hockey club gives Plymouth Township residents a discount.
Oh,
So that's, so
well,
it's.
that's a nice idea,
So
too.
so you pay because the township funds them.
Yeah.
Oh,
The ice hockey club also now comes and helps at our events. So we have the ice hockey players helping out, which was kind of something new. So that
Oh, that'd be good to know about the organizations. Are they, you have a lot of, White Marsh and Conchie kids in there. Or do our kids get a discount since we're the only ones?
I think wrestling does that too.
Wrestling does?
So they pass it right on, yeah. And we can ask them about that when they come in March, so.
Also, Plymouth Little League, I know you guys, we talked about it, they're funding their new batting cage building, so that money's coming right out of their
Yeah.
kitty, so.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
yeah, and it's good to know we have this much money because we're building it up because we always knew we had to replace our batting cages. So
Yeah, and they did ask, would the township be willing to kick in, and we said no. So there's an example where they have the money in the bank and they're going to use their funds to build it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with Chris. I hate to take money away from youth sports or charities. It's just.
It's an investment in our future for the township.
All right. Anything else, Phil?
Yep, thank you.
Go ahead.
One other thing Karen, did you want to talk a little bit about that beer garden or not?
Oh, so when I was at my first Parks and Rec meeting, some of the members had asked about the possibility at Township Day of having a set-aside sort of fenced-off, or, designated area for a beer garden. And it would be run by, hopefully, a local licensed liquor licensee like Miller's or the Little Brew House on Little Avenue. That's so clever, isn't it? And so they were, their first question was, you can't have alcohol in township parks. So you all know I forwarded that question to Mike, and Mike looked into it and said that the township can sponsor, that would not violate our ordinance about alcoholic beverages. He also raised the issue, we would have to look at our insurance policies to see if any liability would be covered should anything happen. And obviously, if it's a liquor licensee, they already know how to ID people and cut people off, visibly intoxicated, and, and they also mentioned that Conshohocken, when they have some of their township events, borough events, they do have some, like sale of beer, wine. I don't know.
Well, the restaurants that participate, I think you can,
Yeah.
the Great American Pub, and they have outdoor seating.
So that was something that the members of the Parks and Recreation Board thought might attract more people and, add something new and different to Township Day. So there's not a legal impediment. I don't know about an insurance impediment. So don't know how the rest of council feels about our Township Day, having a little beer garden included.
It would drum up attendance, I think.
Our hours are 10 a.m. to 2, no judgment.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. You know that, Karen.
2 a.m. or 2 p.m.?
Well, they'll put up a little sign, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. No judgment.
And you could do it for like part of the time and not all the time too.
Yeah, 12 to 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe like 11 to 1, we cut them off at 1 and they're staying till 2.
So they're not-
At least at that hour.
Last calls at 1.
So, John, they're not driving home while in
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a good police presence there.
There always is.
Oversee it, yeah.
If the council would like to do it, then I'll reach out to Divot. I'm sure that if it were, say, Miller Brothers or wherever, we would want their insurance certificate with us named as an additional insurance.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
That's, right, that's how that would
Mhm,
go.
mhm.
So, because we certainly don't want to be, have anybody's employees serving who aren't, haven't had the training on how, when to know when to cut people off, which are bartenders.
Yeah, well, it would be run by whatever licensee
Right.
comes in, so they already know about all their liquor laws. Chief, what do you think about it from a public safety, police coverage standpoint?
I mean, honestly, because we do it during the day and it's in the park, I can't imagine, I wouldn't use Conshohocken as an example because I've been there.
Oh.
I've seen that it degenerates into fights, but that's because there's bars there and it goes
Oh,
all
oh,
night.
okay.
Ours is very short, it's in the middle of the day and there's a lot of kids and there's rides. I would imagine that it'd be an issue, I just don't. Especially since we're all out there participating, it just, I think it's a different atmosphere.
And I would imagine they would have to stay within that segregated area, not be carrying beer all over.
I guess it's however.
However.
That's how West Norrington's was. They had it at a fall festival. It wasn't their township day, but a fall festival. And you had to stay within a fenced-in area to drink your beer. You could not move around with it.
Sort of an Oktoberfest kind of thing.
Yeah, they had a fall festival.
Yeah.
It was popular. They had some bands. I asked what I think their hours were later in the day, because they did have some bands, but, as long as we can.
And I think the idea of cutting it off, making it 11 to 1 rather than, I mean.
You just want to make sure that nobody gets intoxicated.
Right.
Sitting on the Divot board, I know the township that owned the Reading Country Club where there was somebody who drank too much and turned into a lawsuit, but then the municipality got sued. So that's the risk. As long as they know how to cut them off when it's time to cut them off, it can be very, if it's done responsibly, it's great. And if it's not, it can be very, very risky.
But you don't see a problem for us, Chief, because of our hours and the limited time?
I wouldn't imagine, no, I can't see that it's not the same type of thing as we have in other areas like Conshohocken.
Well, Conshohocken is a borough unto itself.
And I would say just to go ahead and look into it insurance-wise, and then obviously once we get that part taken care of, then it's something that the Parks Board and stuff, and you guys can start thinking about logistics and all that. And see if it's worth, if it would even work, right? If somebody would want to set that up for that period of time.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if Miller's or Little Brew House would even want to do it, but, or somebody else, but at least we passed the legal, we have Mike's stamp of approval.
And I think a local brew house was one to expose.
Well, especially the Little Brew House.
Exactly, that little one just opened. Yeah.
Going down to miscellaneous Citizens Board vacancies. I'll just read that since I haven't put my name on anything in a while.
Okay, and then this last one for Brittany, we kind of overlooked her, apologize. She had been appointed somewhat recently to fill an unexpired term, and we didn't get her name on that list, but you looked at it several times late last year, about the reappointments. So she should have been a reappointment, and,
Is that planning commission? Is that correct?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah. She really just got on, right?
She's a baby, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she just got on, and, but, I guess because she was she was filling an unexpired term that her name got listed off the list, so.
Is that something we have to do with the general meeting, or can we
Yeah,
just?
it's just like an appointment like you do every other
Okay.
appointment to boards. So somebody grab that.
I can read that. She enjoys it. I bumped into her.
She gets away from the baby for an hour?
Anything else before
Once a
we
month.
adjourn and move to green agenda? Anybody else? All right.